Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you new here, my name is Donna, and for those of you not new, thank you so much for continuing to come back and support my channel. I appreciate all of you so very much for being here today. Today is also regular content on my channel. This is the palette roulette series in which I let an app choose a palette for me to use and then come back to you and talk to you all about said palette. This is palette roulette number 55, and in this palette roulette we used 2 palettes last week. So we used the Lorac Unzippped Mountain Sunset palette, which looks like this. And we used the e.l.f. Velvet Touch eyeshadow palette called Island Breeze, which looks like this. You guys can see those shades are a bit damaged in here. Had an interesting week. You guys will see in some of the photos that I have to show you that the palette choices this week kind of left me a little bit sad. I am going to first talk about the e.l.f. Island Breeze palette. I have to say that even though this says Velvet Touch eyeshadow, I was a little taken aback by the consistency of these shadows. So let's start first with, this is an e.l.f. eyeshadow palette. It costs $12. There are 6 shadows, so really it's $2 per pan. e.l.f. is a cruelty-free brand, which is amazing. It is a drugstore brand, so you can get it pretty much anywhere. It ranks 3.5 stars on the e.l.f. website, 3.9 on the Ulta website. There are 27 total reviews between those 2 channels. 27 total reviews. There's 0.065 ounces of shadow in each one of these pans, or 0.39 ounces total weight. So I have notes. The website states, this is the e.l.f. website states, and I quote, "This is a soft, cushion textured eyeshadow which provides a radiant color with a dewy finish, with a mix of satin and shimmery hues to create dynamic dimension. The formula is like a powder that melts into your skin like a cream and goes from sheer to bold." No. Nope. This is horrendous. This is the worst eyeshadow palette I have ever in my life touched, ever in my life used, and I will never use it again. I am so glad that this week is over. So, what I will say is it is a soft cushion textured eyeshadow. I think that their idea was duping ColourPop Super Shock shadows. No, they didn't formulate that way. They didn't master that formulation at all. They don't provide radiant color. They do provide dewy finish. They are very wet, and they don't last on your eyeballs very long because of it. Maybe a couple hours before there was like melt off, or I wouldn't say fading necessarily. They just went away. Do you guys remember me talking about this e.l.f. liquid eyeshadow that's in my project pan, and how I was going to put it into my project pan because it's supposed to be a liquid eyeshadow and could be used also as a eye primer, but I was going to try and use it as a highlighter because I found when I used it on my eyes, it just disappeared and left a vacant spot. If it was on top of other shadows, it ate those shadows away. This does the same thing. e.l.f. just does not formulate eyeshadows very well. I've never met an e.l.f. eyeshadow palette that I really liked, and I like a lot of e.l.f. powders, a lot of e.l.f. products, I should say. I do like some of their moisturizers. I do like a couple of their powder formulas, blushes even, but I've never met an e.l.f. eyeshadow that I loved. The formula, it says, is like, what does it say? Mix of satin and shimmery hues to create dynamic dimension. I would say the browns and the red and even the peach maybe perform as a satin, and these two here probably perform more as a shimmer, but these two are super chunky, like literally get on your lid and it just kind of flakes off in chunks. So there's that. Like, I've never met a shimmer that does that. As far as dynamic dimension goes, that's a big no from me. Mix of, let's see, the formula is like a powder but melts into the skin. It melts into the skin so much so that you no longer recognize that there is anything on your skin. And from sheer to bold, absolutely there is no boldness to this. Now, I did watch a couple of YouTube videos after starting to use this and really tried to figure out what I was doing wrong, and I don't know, like, obviously they're just better at it than I am, because there was an eye look that I saw that was created that was beautiful from this palette, but I just can't get behind it. The chartreuse color here is probably the worst one. The red is probably the best as far as going on the lid and staying on the lid and having a lot more pigmentation to it that you can actually see is probably the best. This like silver white shadow is awful. It is horrible with or without primer. There is no getting around that. It performs better with, though, because there is something for it to grasp. So put a primer on, then put a powder down, then put these on top, but then you've got a shadow that performs a little bit better than it would without any of those steps. It is best applied with your finger. The shadows do not blend. There is no blendability in these whatsoever. And as I said, the longevity is maybe a couple hours. I'm going to go ahead and swatch these for you really quick. You guys see what just happened to that gold? Like, you see that flake right there? That is what it does on your eye, on your face. It's like Play-Doh. I don't know. Can you guys see? It's like Play-Doh. I am just really unimpressed with this. So this is that first dark brown. This is the chartreuse. This is the red. And this is the like taupey brown shade. You really don't need to go in hard. That's the good news. But just swatching this, look at the mess I've made of this palette. It's too creamy is what it is. So this is the like peachy shade right there. You guys can see there's hardly any pigmentation to that. And that is the white shade. Again, it does work better with your fingers, so these are definitely swatching better than they appear on your eye. But once you start like trying to blend them to get rid of like harsh lines or whatever, they just kind of take over each other, and there's not really any blendability to them whatsoever. I was not impressed with this palette about, I don't know, 2 tries in, like 2 tries on the same eye. And I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to use it anymore. I think I used every single color in the palette, but I used them sporadically. I think I had one eye look that was all this palette, and it was a hot mess from the beginning. I will be giving this palette to my 7-year-old daughter and my 4-year-old granddaughter. I think that they will love playing with it. The second palette that we had was the Lorac Unzippped Mountain Sunset palette, which happened to be my saving grace for the week, but it still isn't a palette that is my go-to. It is what's on my eyes today. It's just more of a neutral palette with a couple pops of color, but more neutral. It is also a lot cooler toned than the regulatory, you know, palette that I gear towards. So let's talk about the packaging really quick. It is just a cardboard package. The front flap is kind of odd. It does bend away, which is weird, but it doesn't have a mirror on the inside, and that is probably why. It is a limited edition palette. I don't think it's for sale anymore, mainstream for sale anymore. However, I did see it on Namies still, so you can go on Namies and get it. It is a $42 palette, and it does come with a small eyeshadow primer with it. Their behind the scenes eyeshadow primer, which I actually love. I think it's a great eyeshadow primer. Like I said, it's $42. Limited edition, is in stock at Namies. There is 0.58 ounces in this palette, or 0.058 ounces per pan, which isn't a bad size for a pan. This is the unzipped formula, quote unquote. But I think it really is a combo of the unzipped and the pro formula, because it kind of acts a little bit like both, if I'm being honest. And there are 10 shades in this palette. The pigmentation on it is great, at least with the darker shades. With the lighter shades, they tend to kind of dissipate, not look like there's much there. I do have this shade and this shade in my eye look today, as well as the blue. And really, when I look at my eye look, it just looks like blue and this shade next to it. But I also have this shade on the inner corner and in the brow bone, and you can't really tell. It's not my favorite palette, but the longevity for this palette is pretty decent. It runs a good 6 to 7 hours before I notice much fading to it. These are best with primer, but they perform very well without a primer as well. I don't have a primer on my eyes today. Granted, this eyeshadow hasn't. What is that? There's brown from the last palette on my nose right there. That was super. How long has that been there? Why don't you guys tell me? As I said, it's best with a primer than it is without, but it does work well on bare skin. There isn't a primer on my eyes today. Granted, this eye look hasn't been on my face for very long, but I don't know. I feel like it performs just as well with or without primer. So we're going to go through the shades. These ones are named. We're just going to do this first row and then this second row here and go from there. So we have Storm, which is a golden beige, kind of can tend to look silver on your eye, depending on what you pair it with. Then we have Ametrine, which is kind of a shimmery lavender shade. I don't know if you guys are getting that out of that, but I've seen it actually described as like a beige, and I don't feel like it's beige at all. I feel like it's definitely lavender, and from the side it kind of looks pink. We then have Mahogany, which is a nice dark taupey brown. It is kind of a satin. It does have a little bit of a sheen to it, but not much. It is neutral, more neutral in tone. And then there is this one here, which is called Earth. It is a dark brown matte. This is definitely a matte. It is on the warmer end of the spectrum than is Mahogany. And then we have this one, which is called Blackout, and it leans more of a dark forest green. It is also a matte. It has a little tiny bit of a sheen to it. You could potentially call it a satin, but it is almost black on the eye. It looks almost black on the eye, kind of performs like a black does. These two shades also in this palette feel a lot different in texture than these three do. These ones are super soft and buttery, and these ones are a little more grippy in the pan. They feel like they've got, like, I don't know, some kind of glitter in them, but they don't, obviously. Row 2, we have Stone, which is just a light pink matte. This is a shade that I used in my brow bone often. It is a shade that I used all over my lid often after a primer for setting purposes. It is a really nice shade. It is super pigmented though, so if you don't want to set your eye with a pink, then don't use this shade. You'll have to go into another palette because it does stay rather light pink. Then we have this shade here, which is Cliffside. It is a golden, like, brown sugar cinnamon. I don't know if you guys... Cinnamon? It is a golden brown sugar shimmer shade. Can kind of lean a little bit beige. Then we have this shade here, which is Burnt Sienna. It is a medium copper metallic. It is very creamy. It and the blue, which you'll see in a minute, are the two creamiest shades in the palette. They feel very wet. Then we have this one here, which I think I just wiped off. Just one second. Then we have this shade here, which is called Graphite. It is a kind of a dark gray plum. It is definitely a cooler toned matte. It is dustier than most of the other shades in the palette, but it was one of my favorites to use. It leaned a lot more purple in the eye, and it was beautiful with that second shade Ametrine in the first row. Beautiful with that color. And then we have this one here, which is Smoke Signal. It is a medium dark blue metallic, also very creamy, super creamy in the palette. For this row, this pink kind of feels the same way in the pan as these two shades down here too. Funny story is those are the three that are truly a matte shade. The one that is also truly a matte shade that doesn't feel that way is Graphite, which is weird to me because it is one of those darker colors that I feel like should have kind of a wonky feel to it that really doesn't. I did accidentally drop this palette, and it kind of tried to grab it and drag my fingernail through these two shades here. So they're pretty beat up. But I'm going to scooch over so I can put some pictures in here. I'm not necessarily mad at the Lorac palette. I did enjoy using it. It's just, you guys, it's just a palette that I don't see myself picking up very often at all because of how cool in tone it is. I am going to put it into my declutter bin and see if I pull for it at all. I do know that there are quite a few colors in here that I was super stoked to use that I felt like were beautiful colors. I just feel like I have them over and over and over again in my collection, and I feel like the pigmentation on them or how they blended, which I'm not saying that they blended poorly. The darker colors were a little bit harder to blend, but I feel like with how I felt during this week when I had to use either one of these palettes, it does tell me that both of them must go. So I think I am going to declutter both of these palettes because I just don't see me pulling for either one of them. I especially don't see me pulling for this one. That's just not going to happen. I've already promised it to my daughter, and my granddaughter is here this weekend, so they ought to have mad fun with that. It ought to be gone by the end of the day. But this one I also just don't see myself pulling. I have, like, the colors that I really truly love in this palette are going to be this blue, which I actually have a really beautiful blue that is prettier than this one that I would rather use. This Ametrine, which is a very beautiful, like, lavender shimmer that I feel like I could probably find over and over and over again in my collection. I still haven't made it into the Norvina Volume 1 palette, but I know that that is full of purples, and this actually reminds me of a shade in the ABH X Norvina collab. So there's that. I also really love this color Storm, but I feel like I have whites and silvers in my collection that I love more than this one. So I am going to go ahead and declutter both of those palettes, and let's choose a new one. So for those of you who are unaware, I do these palette roulettes. I let an app choose the palette that I use, and that app is the Decide Now app that I found in my Play Store. I do have a Samsung Note 9, but I do know that there are also Wheel of Fortune apps that you can find on the iOS system, because the person I pulled my inspiration from, her channel name is Dana Bow. She has an iPhone. She uses the Wheel of Fortune app to choose her palettes as well. So, okay, so when we choose a palette, we use this wheel, and as I get new palettes, I put them into the wheel. As we use them in the palette roulette series, I do take them out to spin the wheel to make a choice. We just spin here. It is not making a noise. I'm not sure why, but the palette that it has chosen this week is the Morphe James Charles palette. Let me go grab that. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so it seems I have a lot of choice this week, and this is what the palette looks like. I'm sure everybody has seen it. Mine is the full size, not the little tiny mini. This is what the palette looks like. I'm not, just so we're clear, not a James Charles fan. This is what the inside looks like. The flap does have all the shade names on it. So next week I won't be swatching this palette because there is just far too much to swatch. But this is what I'll be using next week. I'm actually kind of excited about it. I don't know if you guys could tell from just looking at it right then. I haven't used it at all. So I'm actually really excited about this palette this week. It gives me a lot of variation. Like, I could go colorful, I could go neutral. Yeah. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to use it. I'm hoping that I don't have the problems that I know that some people had when they first tried it. It'll be a good palette to have for some of my Vlogmas videos that I'm doing, some get ready with me's and whatnot. We will see. We will see. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. It really does help our channel out here in YouTube Nation. I also hope that you're considering subscribing to my channel. Hopefully you like me or my content enough that you're considering doing that. Please note that I do upload content typically on a typical month, on a typical week, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, typically at 9 a.m. And that is dependent on my work schedule. Sometimes it's a Sunday instead of a Friday. And sometimes I have computer problems that debilitate me, and I'm unable to get my videos up when I really, really want to. But this month, because it is Vlogmas, there are videos going up every single day, so I really do hope that you'll want to stick around. I really do hope that I'll see you in the comments section. And until next time, guys, bye. My house is a madhouse right now. My granddaughter's here and she's kind of a menace. I love her.